What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. This is TWA Motorsports, and today, yes, today is the day we are going to make this thing look completely different. So what do we got planned? Okay, so the very first thing I'm going to do is we're going to pop off the Denali badges. We're going to pop off the dealer badge on the back. We're going to take the Yukon off, and I'm going to just paint correct those areas with my buffer. That's the first thing we're going to do. The next thing we're going to do is I do have a window tinting appointment, so we're going to get the windows all tinted. And you guys know how I tint windows. I tint them black as you can get them. I'm going to do the whole front windshield. I'm going to go over the sides and then over what's already on the back. So I have that appointment scheduled in a couple days. The last thing we're going to do, and I told you I was going to try to do all this in one video, is we are going to lower this thing. Now, I'm going back and forth. What we're going to do is we're going to do a little testing today because I'm using a product that I've never used, and I really want to keep the auto ride on this thing. So what we're going to be using in the back is springs, obviously, but we're going to measure it, see how far. I'm going to do the back first. We're going to see how far the back comes down, and then we will determine what we are going to do on the front. But I will show you guys all those parts, and of course I will list them in the description down below as well. But like I said, the very first thing we're going to start with is we're going to start with the emblems. I'll talk about what I'm going to be using when I start, and then I'll time lapse that process so you guys can see. And then we'll move on to the drop. But before we drop it, obviously I do want to, like I said, take some measurements so we can kind of see what we started with and what we're ultimately going to finish with. So let's grab my chair, get over here on this door, and get these emblems off. All right, guys, so if you've seen my videos before, you know pretty much what I use, but I use a heat gun here. I've got some fishing line so we can kind of get behind those and saw them off. Then I have some 3M adhesive remover here, and I have a drill with an eraser wheel on it. Guys, this eraser wheel, this is the only way to do this in my opinion. And then I'll show you, once we get to the polishing stage, I'll show you exactly what we'll be using there. But let's get started by heating these up, and I'll time lapse, like I said, this process, and then we'll talk about what I'm going to be using as far as, you know, fixing the paint once I take this off. So while most of that came off, you can see that it left an outline, and we are going to use some M105, my microfiber pad, and we're just going to go over this a couple times. It shouldn't take much. This car's so new that you know, it hasn't been on there for years, like we just did a few videos back or so on the truck. We shouldn't have as much issue as far as buffing this off. I generally don't anyway. I need to clean out this pad. I have a brush too to clean out this pad, and it really needs cleaned out. But let's get this area knocked out. Just after a couple passes on it, you can tell looks way better. And I think I've decided for now to keep this here. Because this has a chrome strip on the running board and around the mirrors or in the window, I don't know, I think I'm going to keep it for now. I can always come back and remove it later. But let's move on to the back. This top one will be a little bit different because it's one of those bubble stickers. So I'm going to use a plastic razor blade on it. Still going to use the fishing line on the Yukon emblem, but for here, I'm going to go ahead and use this guy. Now that we have all the badges off and the paint fixed underneath, and if you guys notice back here, I went up a little higher. The reason being is whoever sold this originally, I bought it used, but whoever sold it originally, you could see the outline of theirs, and I couldn't deal with that. So anyway, now that we got, like I said, all those off, we're gonna get some measurements. I'm gonna go around and measure from the center of the fender to the ground, and I'm gonna try to line it up with the center cap so we're getting somewhat accurate numbers. Now this ground or this garage here is really level, so I don't have any problems with it sitting on an incline like I used to when I was working in my driveway. So we'll get some measurements. I'll show you guys those as soon as I get them, and then we'll start by, I think we're going to start in the back here. We're going to get the rear wheels off, and I'll show you kind of where I'm going to be jacking it up and supporting it. Well, I can honestly say this is the first time ever that it's measured out even. Driver's side front 35 1/4, passenger side front 35 3/16. That's within a 1/16 of an inch. In the back, they are both 38 on the dot. It's absolutely crazy because I've never had that happen. But anyway, we've got it up off the ground. The very first thing, guys, make sure you chalk the front wheels. I've got some rubber chalks in front of both of the front wheels. I've got the jack stand right here, right in front of where the lower control arm bolts. You can see right there. And I do not have it resting on the jack stand yet. I lifted from the center of the rear end here. And because I'm gonna need to take the wheel off and mark the air ride sensor. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and get the wheels off. Should be a 7/8. We'll get them out of the way, and then I'll show you exactly what we need to mark. So you can see now that I've got the wheel off what we're gonna have to mark. This guy right here is an arm that as this goes down, it adjusts and inflates these rear shocks. So what we wanna do is we're gonna mark it on this little arm here, and then we're gonna mark it on the housing. And then I'm actually gonna mark it on the frame just to, you know, just to make sure. But generally just this piece spins and the housing stays where it's at. So we're gonna go ahead and mark that before we let pressure off the jack. Once we have that marked up here, I'm gonna go ahead and take a couple things loose. First of all, I'm gonna take a flathead screwdriver here, and we're going to pry this apart so we can get this loose. And the main reason here, guys, is when you let the suspension down, it's going to want to stretch this line, and we don't want to put any more on it than it already has. I'm gonna use my pliers to get this out of the frame, and now we have, you know, slack in it. After we do that, we're gonna go ahead and loosen the sway bar. So the center of this, the outside's 18. Sometimes you get lucky, put an 18 impact on it, it'll come loose. If not, it's 6mm in the center, and you can just loosen it that way. Put a 6mm in the center, and like this guy here, and then use an 18-inch wrench, and instead of loosening, you're gonna tighten the center, and that'll pull that apart. Once we get that, then I'm gonna undo the bottom of the shock down here, which is this bolt and nut. That is a 21mm. So we'll whip all this stuff out, and then what we'll do is relax the rear end at that point. You need to do that on both sides though. Once we have all that stuff loose, before I let the rear end down, I am gonna go ahead and pop this guy off. I'm just using a flathead screwdriver. And the main reason I'm using this is because I do not have like a pry tool other than a plastic one. And really, you kind of need one. Got it off there. There we go. You can see that once you do that, you can twist it off the top. So we've got it marked. You can see my mark there. That's where it needs to be. So we're gonna have to lengthen this, and I'll show you how we're gonna do it here after a while. But now we can go ahead and relax the suspension, let the rear end down. It'll set on the jack stands at this point, and then we can get to where we need to cut. Now you can see all the suspension's relaxed, and you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to pull this out of the way, this would be all, you'd have a ton of tension on this. But I'm gonna go ahead and pull the bump stop out. And then honestly, guys, if you have it down far enough, if you did everything I said, you can go ahead and take the spring out at this point too. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there was a piece that came out of the top. There's a cushion on the top, but we need to cut, because of the amount of drop I'm going to do, we're going to do what they call the free travel mod. And if you guys have watched my videos in the past, you've seen me do it, but we're going to cut along this line right here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a screwdriver and scribe a line in the coating. Now look, I'm only going to show you one side of this whole setup, but it's duplicate on the other side. It's actually a little easier on the other side because you don't have the gas tank here. So I'm going to use a cutoff wheel. I'll show you, kind of what I've got as I'm going. But yeah, we do need to cut this section off. I know a lot of people don't like to do that. If you're going 4 inches or more, you need to cut this off. No ifs, ands, or buts. Otherwise, it's going to ride terrible. So let's get this marked and start cutting. So hopefully you guys can see the mark that I made. You're just following the frame. You don't want to get too high. You're going to cut into the frame. We're just cutting this off the bottom. The other thing is on this side, the other side's a little bit different. There's not quite as much to cut off. Really, you just have to cut off where the bump stop is held. But on this side, I like to cut a relief cut right here, because how I cut this, guys, is I cut the front, I bend it down, and then cut from the inside. That way I don't have to be under the vehicle letting stuff fly in my face. So I am using just a grinder with a cutoff wheel, and I know that a lot of people are complaining about me not having a guard on it, but I have more control and I can use it on different angles when I don't have the guard on. And not only do I use eye protection as far as like goggles, but I also use a face shield. So we're gonna go ahead and cut this off. I'm not gonna show you guys this process of me actually cutting, because the last time I did, it completely ruined the screen here on my camera. So I've decided that if you guys want to see the actual cutting portion, you can go back. I'll link the video up above here of me doing this on my Suburban, because I think I showed that. I also showed it on the older Tahoe video. So I'll just cut in every once in a while and kind of show you the progress on it, and that way you can see, kind of what I'm doing. Well, I figured I'd cut in and show you guys kind of where we're at, so you can see that I've cut almost, I'm completely through here on this one. And then I cut that relief cut in the center, and then I've got almost, I'm all the way through here. So you're gonna go through quite a few discs. My guess is around 4 or 5. I have 3, so I'm hoping I can do both sides with 3, but I just don't think that's possible. Anyway, I'm gonna keep cutting, and then I'll show you guys once I get it bent down, so I can show you what you need to do as far as getting this loose. If you were able to get on the other side without the gas tank there, you could just cut both sides. But I don't know if you guys are like me. I don't like laying on the ground with grinding stuff falling, and even on my face shield, it just makes it where you can't see. So we're gonna do the rest of this, and like I said, I'll show you when it's bent down and kind of how it's, we're gonna cut from there. You can see that I've got it cut, and I'm using a pry bar, this one to get started, and then another bigger pry bar to pry this down so I can get access to cut the back here. Now, before I go cutting between here and the gas tank, right here in this section, I'm going to put a piece of steel behind this, just in case we go through. It gives us, an added layer of protection and not hit the gas tank. You don't have to worry about this as much on the other side. Just make sure there's no wires up behind, which generally there isn't. But yeah, make sure that you're careful cutting on this side with the gas tank. But we're getting real close. We're over halfway there. This is what we've got. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take just a flap wheel, clean it up, and then I'll probably spray a little paint on there just to make sure that it doesn't rust. But you don't have to get everything. You just have to get that major portion there. So able to avoid the gas tank. You can see that it's really close on this side, but we're gonna go to the other side. Like I said, I'm not gonna show you guys that because it is way easier, but let's keep going. Now that we've got that cut off, painted, everything's good, I blew everything off, got both sides cut completely out, we are going to get some parts here. And so what parts are we using? Well, like I said, if you guys have watched me do this before, it's pretty common. I'm using Trailblazer springs, and yes, they are for a Trailblazer, but they do seem to ride really well. I really like them. And so, of course, guys, like always, I'll list all this stuff in the description. Because we're going with that, generally that's 4 to 4.5 inches. I'm not gonna be reusing the upper and lower pads there. So those pads that you see right here, I'm not gonna be using those. I'm going to be using some heater hose on the top of the spring, And then the bottom, it's connected to metal, so it's far enough away, it's not touching the body, so you shouldn't have any issues there. But the next thing I want to do, normally I'd put the springs in now and lift it up, but I'm going to go ahead and put the DJM rear suspension kit in. This comes with a relocation for your lower control arms. It comes with relocators for your shocks, and of course all the bolts, but then it also comes with new sway bar end links. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and I need to cut this zip tie that kept this wire out of the way while I was cutting. I'm going to cut that, move the strut or the spring or shock, sorry, I can't even talk, move the shock back, and I'm going to go ahead and get the old sway bar end link out of the way because we don't need that there. And then the next thing I want to do is I'm going to take the lower control arm out because we're going to need to bolt onto that position. And I'm going to try to do one side at a time. With the rear end down, I am going to put, I think, a jack stand under this side of the rear end when I disconnect this. Should be a 21 millimeter down there. And then while we've got that out, we can go ahead and put in our new bump stop, which is going to go in that hole that you see right here on top of the pad. That guy right there. So let's go ahead, get that stuff loose, get that old sway bar end link off, and then we'll talk about how these new parts go into place. So I got that loose, the lower control arm. I also had to loosen the front bolt in order to get it out of the way. But now we've got our relocation bracket, and how this thing goes on here is it literally sandwiches up just like that. And so this will be the new point that your lower control arm will mount. And the hardware that comes with it, you'll have a bolt that comes up through the bottom here. And these are not side specific, so it doesn't matter what side you put which on. But we'll go ahead and put a bolt, and the bolt heads are generally on the, like on this one, the bolt head will be on the bottom. On this top one, the bolt heads will be on the inside. And I'll show you guys once I get it in place before I tighten it up. You can see I have it in place now. I've got the bolts, the head of the bolt on the inside. You can see the inside one here and the other one here. And then I have, I don't know if you guys can see the one on the inside here that comes in from the bottom. So got those three. We can go ahead and snug those down. You can tighten those just as tight as you can possibly get them. It's not going to hurt anything. But the next thing I want to do before we get too far along is I want to put my bump stop in. It's just going to go in this hole up top here. If I can find it without looking. Maybe. Quite a ways, oh there it is, quite a ways back. So there it is right there. We're gonna go ahead and tighten that down as well. And that hole's already existing, so you don't have to worry about doing anything there. So I'm gonna go ahead and snug these down, all three of these, snug down my bump stop, and then we will put the shock relocator on. Now that we've got all those tightened up, we can move on to the shock extender, and it sandwiches right up around here like this. And so in the bottom, coming through the bottom, there's a plate here, and it's threaded. And so you're gonna have a bolt that comes into it, and then same thing, our bolt heads for the rest are gonna face out. So you'll have two bolts, one for this side and one for the other side. And we'll go ahead and snug those down as well, and then I'll give you guys a look at it. This is what it looks like all snugged down, everything's good. So at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and try to swing my my lower control arm up into that front connection. So a lot of times, guys, I've had to use in the past a ratchet strap to pull the rear end forward, because when you release it, it just doesn't seem like it wants to go back. But we're gonna try it without a ratchet strap. If not, you can hook a ratchet strap on this and go to the front of the car, and that will roll that rear end forward so you can get that in place. So just to let you know, if you have issues, that is what you would, I suggest doing. If you have two people, it'll help because sometimes they can just roll the rear end manually, or sometimes you can lift on the center of the differential. You can see up there where I have my jack stand. If you have somebody that can lift up there, that would help too, because that would roll that rear end. Now that we have that lower A-arm in place there, you can see it down there. I unhooked both sides at the same time. That makes it a little easier on you. And you know, I'm just working by myself. So, but the next step we need to take is we need to put the new sway bar end link in. Now there's two of them. This one has a little bit of a curve. The other one has way more curve on it. In fact, let me roll over here and show you. This is the one with more curve. You can see this guy is the passenger side, and this one is the driver's side. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in. I'm gonna put a little grease on this, and we're using our factory hardware. So the same bolt that we took out the factory one with is what we're going to use, but the kit does supply a new attachment for the bottom. But at this point, I'm going to get that in place, and I'm just going to snug these. I'm not going to tighten them up yet. I really want to load the suspension up before I do any kind of torquing. So let's put this in place, let it just kind of hang out there. I'm going to put both sides in, and then we're going to get the springs ready, because I'm not going to be using, like I said, I'm not going to be using that top pad. I'm going to show you guys, I'm going to be using some hose, some coolant hose, but I'll show you that here in just a second. Let me get these in. At this point, we're ready for the spring, but like I said, I'm not going to be using those top pieces, the original pieces that came in it. You could see this spring compared to the stock one, but I'm going to be using a piece of 5/8 heater hose. So I'm going to thread this on the top portion, and guys, it's really easy. There is an up and a down here. The easiest way to tell is the markings on the spring. So it should go where you could read the markings. So this is the top right here, and so that is where we're going to thread that heater hose, and we're going to thread it on as far as we can. Generally, what we need to do is we need to get it past this first hoop and then partially on the second if possible. So I'm going to be using a little bit of grease because it is a pain. Do not heat it up. That seems to make it sticky. So we'll just start there and see if we can get them both threaded up. Well, after a long fight of getting that on, guys, it's a pain to get that on. It literally just wears me out, just turning that in order to get it to thread on that spring. So some people might bail out and just go back with the piece that sits on top, but it took me longer than I thought it would. Anyway, I've got them set in here, and you can see that the opening on the bottom of the spring I have facing the axle right here. I don't know if you guys can tell right now, but the brake in the bottom of the spring is facing this bolt right here. And so I did the exact same thing on the other side. You want them to face exactly the same. So I've got my son coming out here to lift the jack up. And as he lifts the jack up, I'm just going to be under here making sure these go into their pockets where they're supposed to go. The bottoms, you don't have to worry about, they'll stay where they're at, but the tops, you need to make sure that you get them up in that pocket. I've got the rear end pushed up now with his help, and I went ahead, because the shocks are so hard to compress, guys, you can unplug the air and that helps, but I decided as we were going up to go ahead and put the stock shock bolts in. So that is what we've done here. Not tight yet. Just got them in there, and just hand tight for now, because like I said, we're going to torque this once we get it on the ground, or at least the suspension loaded. So anyway, on to the next thing. We need to move this sway bar. So what you need to do is take a 10mm and loosen. Actually, you need to take these completely out, and the ones on the other side you're going to have to loosen, because we're going to slide our sway bar over about 1 inch. So let's go ahead and get a 10mm and take these out. Now that we've got that out of place, we need to move this mount, so this D-ring mount, over 1 inch. So you need to move it 1 inch over, and then you're going to mark it and drill 2 holes, and then they supply you new bolts in order to make this new connection. Used to, on the older ones, see that other hole back there on the right? This guy right here? Used to, you could use that one, but that's a little further than 1 inch, and we don't want to go that far. So we're just going to go ahead and move over 1 inch, drill 2 3/8 holes in this plate, and then, like I said, use the hardware that they supply in order to bolt it back up. Now you can see we have our 2 holes drilled, so hopefully you can see that. Got one here, and then one there. So we can go ahead and bolt this in place, and I'm just going to loosely bolt it in for now, and the reason being is because we are going to go ahead and put the sway bar end links in before we tighten this D-ring up, because like I said, this has to go towards the passenger side. Well, now we've got, I went ahead and tightened these bolts, and there's no real torque spec, guys. Just get them nice and snug. I actually ran it down with my smaller impact, my 1/4 inch impact. I tightened the 10mm on the other side, and then I did that after I snugged these down. I haven't torqued these yet, but we're going to torque these to 37, the sway bars end links here. We're going to torque the bottom of the shock here to 85, that's the factory spec, and then the lower control arm that we took out here, it needs to be torqued to 74 and then swung 55 degrees past that. So, you know, honestly, guys, you could probably go to like 85 on this as well if you didn't want to go, you know, if you didn't have a way to measure the degrees. But let's go ahead and torque all this stuff down. Now that we've got that all torqued down, I'm going to go ahead and put our stuff back in place here. Maybe. There we go. This just pushes in the frame. It only goes, it's shaped a certain way, so it only goes in a certain way. So that's good. Now we need to do this. So remember when we mark this, we need to measure. So we're gonna pull it up to where it needs to be, and then we're gonna measure center to center here. And then I'm gonna show you guys how I'm gonna do this, because what we're gonna do is you can pull the ends off of your old ones. So I'll show you here. You can see how I'm gonna do it. I've got a piece of all thread, but if you put these in a vise or just have a pair of pliers, you wanna pull on the end here, don't pull on this section. Otherwise you'll mess it up and you won't be able to reuse it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna use a piece of all thread and we're gonna cut it down to the size that we need. What's really cool is like, so what I'm gonna do, like I said, is I'm gonna measure center to center where it needs to be, and then we'll cut this to length, and it ain't gonna take much. I can probably actually cut it with those snips right there, but anyway, let's get this measured and cut. We've got that piece of all thread cut. I put the ends on and just snapped it back in place, and check it out, our lines line up. So that's pretty much it for the back, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and put grease in the grease fitting of the sway bar end links. But other than that, we're ready to put the wheels back on. So I think that's my next step. I'm just gonna go ahead and put the wheels on. We're gonna set it down on the ground and kind of see what we got. It's definitely lower. Let's let it down and see what it looks like. Definitely better. So now I'm gonna turn it on, drive it up and down the road a little bit, see if this settles out some before I take another measurement and start on the front. Because I think that once the air compressor pumps up, it might run for a little bit, and if that's the case, we may have to go a different route in the front. You'll see what I'm talking about when I get up to the front. So I decided to go ahead and start on the front. I went up and down the road a couple times, everything's good. It came down almost 4 inches right on the nose. It's gonna settle, and I think it's probably gonna settle about a ½ inch. So that tells me about what I need to know just from going up and down the road, just from past experience. So what we are going to do, we've got the front wheels off. You can see we've got the jack stands under it. We're gonna take some of this stuff loose. You can see same thing like we did in the back. We're gonna use just a little flat blade screwdriver. We're gonna take this guy loose. Maybe. And then once we get it loose, then there's a connection up at the top here that we need to pull out of the frame, and we need to disconnect just to get it out of the way. There is a lock on that. There's a little red lock. If you slide it up, you can use this same screwdriver, slide it up, and get this unplugged and kind of looped over out of the way. Once we've got that loose, I'm gonna go ahead and take this guy out. This is a 36 millimeter. Now this is a 4-wheel drive, so it's gonna have an axle nut here in the center, and we need to go ahead and take that out. Like I said, it's a 36 millimeter. I'm gonna be using my impact. If you don't have an impact, you're gonna have to pop the center of your wheel out, put the wheel back on, and put it on the ground, otherwise it's gonna spin. Now I like to use a magnet to pull the washer out, because there is a washer behind it. So we're gonna set these aside. The next thing we're gonna do is I'm gonna take the whole brake off as one unit. So this is a 18 millimeter, I believe, back here in the back. To get the brake bracket loose, there should be one up top and then one down below. I'm gonna get that loose, and then this 10 millimeter that goes in the top right here that holds the rest of this line, I'm gonna go ahead and take. Now that we've got the brake caliper off, those two 18s, I did take the 10 millimeter out of this guy just to give the brake a little more room, and I've got the brake, you can see over there, setting on a jack stand. But we need to take the T30 out of the rotor here. and generally they're not too tight, and this one's not. If they are, you're in big trouble because these will break and you'll have to drill them out. That is not fun. So once we get it out of the way, I think I'm gonna go ahead and take the sway bar off next. I'm gonna take it off on both sides. I think it's a 15 on the top and a 15 on the bottom. I'm gonna use my impact for that because, well, as much as I can use my impact for, I'm gonna use it. Now that we got the sway bar out of the way, I'm gonna take the hub assembly out. Now it is 18 millimeter and they're tough to get to. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not even sure that I'm gonna be able to reach the top one because the ball joint's in the way. May have to take it loose first. I don't know. I don't remember having this issue on the last one. We can get to the bottom two. It's the top one, and I don't think an open end wrench would just strip, so I don't want to strip it. I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna see if we can take the axle out, the hub assembly here. In the center, there's an axle. There's 15 millimeters, 6 of them up top here. So when you spin this, you can see this whole shaft moves. Up there, there's 15 millimeters. And so I'm gonna just zip those out. I've done this in the past. To be honest with you, it makes things a little easier anyway. So we'll just get those out of the way, and then that'll help me have access here to this if we can pull the whole shaft out here. We may have to go ahead and knock the bottom of the, in fact, we're gonna do that first. There's 15 millimeters for the bottom of the strut here. We're just gonna knock those out real quick. That way maybe we'll get some movement. And if we get some movement, maybe I'll have a little more access. You can see I've got a pretty long extension to get those 15s out up at the top. And hopefully this won't lose so much power that I can't get them loose. They're generally not torqued down too much. So taking that loose didn't gain me as much as I thought, but now I can at least get an extension up top here and try to get this 18 millimeter loose. Just really, really close with this upper ball joint. Man, I need like a really, really shallow 18. I might be able to get a box in of a wrench on there. Problem is these things torque down so much that you know, sometimes you have issues. But there's an 18 that comes in. There's 3 of them, 1 here and then 2 at the bottom. The 2 at the bottom I was able to loosen up, but that one seems to be a bear. So I'm gonna grab a open end or even a closed end like a box wrench and see if we can loosen that up. Here's the only thing I found that'll work. I had to go down to a 3/8 drive with an extension. Actually, it's not even an extension, it's a reducer, because I want to use my breakover bar. So it fits in there with no issues. Hopefully we can get it loose. All right. Not as bad as I thought. Once you get them loose, they generally come out pretty easy. Now we're going to switch over to the impact, if we can get it in there, with the swivel. Now normally, you have to hammer this off, but this one is starting to come off as I got the bolts out. There's this ring back here, which is interesting because that's new for like newer stuff. But at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and knock the tie rod loose. I think the upper and lowers, I think the upper is an 18. I believe this is a 21, if I remember right. And the bottom should be a 24. So we're gonna see if we can get all those loose, and then we'll tap on them a little bit with the hammer and see if we can get the spindle out of the way. So this is a 21, but it's spinning. And so is the 18 up here, which that really sucks because it does have a spot to get into it. The problem is because of this axle being in the way, you can't get into it. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna see if we can get this one loose. And once we get it loose, maybe we can get this swung over far enough to get this axle out, and then maybe we can address the issues that we're having. I believe this is a, I don't remember, I think this is like a 12 millimeter here. If you wanted to put something else on it, that's just what I had handy. So let's, now that's out of the way. Let's see if we can push this or pull this. I think we're gonna have to, we may have to get that bottom one loose. Once we get the bottom one loose, maybe we can pull it off and out enough to get into where I need to be. I wish that that one wouldn't spin. That's what's killing me right now. And I don't want to put anything on the end of it because it's threaded all the way down. It's not like this. Either way, we'll get it. I'm gonna go grab a 24. We'll knock the bottom loose real quick. So it didn't take much to get the bottom one off. So let's see if we can knock it loose. All right, we got it loose. Problem is that we may have to get a jack, lift this up a little so we can get it off that bottom ball joint. I don't know. Never had that issue before. The only other option here is I could take there's like a tray on the bottom that's keeping this from dropping on the inside. If I took that out, chances are I could probably sneak past it. I actually might be able to turn this enough now to get past that. Yeah, maybe. Nope, not gonna happen. So, I have to figure out something here. See if we can take a few more bolts out here. If I could get this bolt out. There we go. I might be able to get something on that. It just sucks that it's spinning because, man, that just really ruins your day. Sometimes you can put pressure too on the bottom of the A-arm and push it up and keep this seated while you're popping it loose. You know, that's the cool thing about using an impact. If we could get an impact in there, because it hits it so quick and knocks it off before it has a chance to spin. But oh well, we'll get there. Well, I found an option. I lifted on this and that wasn't working, but I found an Allen key that actually fit. So now we can continue our progress. Look, it's already loose. That's good. Go ahead and get this one out of the way, the old spindle. I'll take that ring out too. Those spindles are aluminum. Now this piece, this is what I was talking about. Had we been able to get that out, life would have been a little easier on us. So I'm gonna go grab what we're replacing, which is the spindle. Man, those ball joints are not great. Crap. We're gonna leave them. I think we can get a few more miles out of them. They're not in great condition though. Dadgum. All right, either way, we're gonna go grab the new spindle and I'll show you guys the difference. Here we are to the spindles, and there's a couple ways I was going to do this. So this is the spindle. I was going to use this either way, and what this does is, actually this guy's aluminum, the new one's steel, but this raises, so the stock, when it raises it up 2 inches. So it doesn't look like that from side by side, but if you set them on top of each other, you can really see the difference. But the other thing I bought is from mcquaghys, and this is supposed to set on the factory mag ride shock. And so what you do is you take the strut apart, and then this spaces it down 2 inches with nothing, and then I think 1.5 inches with that, and then 1 inch if you put this on. I was going to put this in, but I've ultimately decided not to for now, and the main reason is it's going to be really low in the front and not as low in the back. So until I can find a better solution for an actual 5-inch drop spring for the back, I think we're going to leave this to the side. I really wanted to keep the mag ride because it rides so well, but I don't want it to have that weird low in the front look like it had to begin with. I want more of a level look. So for now, we're just going to do the spindles. Like I said, we're going to set this aside. I'll list this down below. You could use this as opposed to the spindle if you wanted to get the 2-inch drop. I've seen guys use that, and it does work on a 4-wheel drive, even though the some of the places you read says it's 2-wheel drive only. It does work on both. Same way with this guy. But in order to do this, if you're using a 17-inch wheel, you're gonna have to trim the bottom stud off. And I don't know who would be using a 17-inch wheel, but that's why they send these. We will not be using those because we're not gonna have to trim the bottom stud. However, we are gonna have to trim the top stud because it will interfere with the drive shaft that comes through, or the CV shaft. So I'll show you guys what I'm gonna be doing there, but the first thing we need to do is we're gonna assemble this with the arm over there, or we're gonna assemble the hub, put the hub in here and assemble that. But before we do, we're gonna set it up here and look at how many threads that we're gonna need. And I'll show you guys on the camera here, but because it's lighter to do it this way, we'll set that up in there, kind of see where we need to be, and then I'll show you what we're gonna have to trim. So this area right here is what I'm talking about. So we're gonna put this up here, we're gonna kind of set this to the side, and you can see we need to trim about 2 or 3 threads off the bottom of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this back off, I'm gonna thread this up to about where it needs to be, and then I'm gonna cut with this on. And the reason why is this is gonna act as kind of like a thread chaser when we go to take it back off, so we don't screw up the threads. But you may have to use something to clamp around this. Try to be careful not to get real crazy clamping on it because it does want to spin. But I'm gonna hold this with some vice grips and maybe a towel so we don't screw up this. But yeah, we do have to trim this, and I'll show you, once I get this ran up into place, I'll show you exactly how many threads I'm thinking we're gonna have to cut off. So as you can see, there's not a ton, maybe 1/4 inch of threads. The manual actually says 1/4 to 1/2 inch. It's really about 3 threads is what you're cutting off. So I'm gonna get my cutoff wheel here real quick, and we're gonna zap this off. And then, like I said, this is gonna act as a thread chaser to pull it back when we're taking it back off. Now, once we've got that off there, cut off, I'm gonna spin this back out of place. You can see what I'm talking about. It acts as a thread chaser. So at this point, this axle that I took loose, I'm gonna go ahead and hook it back up into place. I really didn't have to take it out. I just thought it might be a little easier since this guy was spinning on me, but ultimately, you know, we got it done. So I'm gonna go ahead and put those 15s back in. Not a huge deal there. They do get torqued. I think the 57 foot-pounds is all those torque too. So I'm gonna go ahead, do that off camera so you guys don't have to watch that. But I'm gonna load the spindle, and it's easier to do this, or load the hub assembly in the spindle, and I'll show you that once I've got it all done up. And we're gonna go ahead and torque it on the ground if I can get somebody to help me hold it. Something we do want to put back in place is this little spacer. Generally that's associated with aluminum, but we are going to put it back in place. And then we're gonna set this guy in place. Try to get it lined up. It's kind of tough with that spacer in there, but should be able to get it. And we're gonna go ahead and torque these. These get torqued to 133 foot-pounds, so you're gonna have to have somebody hold it, or I'd put it in my vise, but my vise would just fall over. I need to get it mounted to a heavy table. But if you get somebody to hold it while you're torquing it, you should be fine. And once we get these torqued, then we'll lift it up into place and position that CV shaft in the center as we're going on. Now we're gonna grab our original bottom bolt for the bottom ball joint, and of course the one for the top as well. And I'm gonna set it up there, and we're gonna put this thing in place. Now, it is going to be pretty heavy. You can get this started in the center and then swing down and grab the ball joint. And I'm gonna go ahead and put that nut on there, just so I have some extra leverage. And then we need to turn this until it wants to fit in this, because it is splined. And you'll get it to a point, there we go. And then this one's a little harder because we really need to start it while we're coming up with it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go grab my jack, and I'm gonna put under here, and I'm gonna jack it up a little bit so we can get this started as it comes through. You have a very small window. So I'll get my jack and probably a block of wood, get under this A-arm, and we'll get it lifted and this nut started. You can see how tight the clearance is and why we had to trim off the bottom of that. Now, what happens when this starts to spin? Because it's going to. Well, you're gonna have to lift on the bottom of the A-arm, and if this starts to spin, I'll show you, but generally what I do is I use this block of wood that I have underneath. I put it underneath the ball joint on the bottom and lift up as much as I can and put as much pressure on that A-arm, and generally that will give you enough to get it snug down. It gets torqued to 37, so we're gonna go ahead and torque that to 37. It's starting to spin, you see it? Sometimes you can push on it and get lucky, but, and obviously guys, I'm gonna have to use a crow's foot here to tighten. Not a huge deal. So 37 here, 92 on the lower. So I'm gonna go ahead and torque both of those. You can see what I'm talking about. Because that bottom one, once I had it torqued, because that top one is spinning, this is what I did. I lifted it up from that bottom ball joint to put pressure on it. Now we should be able to snug it down to the 37. The next two things I'm gonna put in are the tie rod. And it gets torqued to 44. And then I'm gonna put the bottom of the struts back in, those 215s that go on the bottom of the struts, and they get torqued to 37. Before we put the brakes back on, we need to cut this because you can see it's gonna interfere with what we got going on over here. So there's a little divot that this sets in right here. So we need to cut off from that divot this direction. You can see it would interfere if we didn't. So I'm gonna go ahead and trim this section off right here. You can just snap the line out from behind this, and that way you can just cut the bracket without the line on it. Now that we have that cut, we can go ahead and put our 10mm back in place here. And it's gonna wanna set just in a certain pocket. Like I said, there's a little dimple on the back side that sets in the other hole. And do not over tighten these, you will snap them off. There is not much to them. I think 108 inch-pounds or 106 inch-pounds, something like that. I'm just gonna get it snug until it doesn't move. That is good enough. Same thing on the upper one here, on the A-arm. Guys, these things are very brittle. I've snapped them off in the past. That is good enough. Then we're gonna snap our plug back in. And And then we can go ahead and hook this one up if you'd like, but I think I want to get the brake in place so we're not pulling on it so hard. So I'm gonna go grab the rotor and the center nut and washer here. We got our rotor. Make sure you line up the hole where this guy threads in. Same thing here, don't over tighten, because if you ever have to take it off, you don't want it stripped. And then we're gonna grab that washer and the nut, and you know, there's some people say you need to replace it anytime you take it off. I never have, just for lowering purposes. I'm gonna run it down with the impact as tight as my impact will go, but then once we get the wheel on and this thing's set on the ground, you need to pop your center cap out, because we're gonna torque it through the center of the wheel with the weight on it, because otherwise it's gonna wanna turn. Now that we've got the rotor on, let's grab the caliper. What a mess. Had that sitting on an extra jack stand. Act like it's a little stuck. Put our two 18 millimeters in, and guys, these go down super tight as well. 144 foot-pounds on these. I think I'm gonna have to change hands here. I don't know if you guys are like me, but I'm right-handed, and anything I do left-handed makes me feel like an idiot. It just doesn't work. So once we get these snug down, we'll torque them to 144, and then we'll move on to putting this line back in place with that 10 millimeter and then the wiring. So the last couple things we need to do, we need to hook this 10 millimeter back up and obviously plug our wiring back in, hook it into the clip and the frame. Make sure you slide that red lock that we unhooked on this guy up there back into place. But at that point, if you finish the other side, we can go ahead and put our sway bar bushing back in. This only has so much movement, so if you've not finished the other side, don't put this in yet, because otherwise that's going to cause you some issues. So I make this the last thing that I do on both sides. So I'll get this one in, go finish the other side, finish the other side, get this one in, get the other one in, and then honestly guys, we're ready to bolt the wheel back on and set it down. As you can see, I got the wheel back on, it's on the ground, but you also notice, like I said, that center cap's out. So we're gonna do a couple things. We need to torque that center nut for that axle. That needs to be torqued to 177, like I said earlier. And then I'm gonna go ahead and torque all the wheels as well. I generally torque them down to 100. So after that, we'll get it out, drive it down the road, back and forth. We'll bring it back in here so we can get a look at how much the drop looks like. And you know, because right now there's a ton of gap. I know you guys can't see it really, but it doesn't even look like we lowered it just because that wheel you know, comes in. But I think it's gonna settle out and look kind of nice. So we're back from a drive, and man, it's looking good, guys. It's looking really good. I think it's still gonna come down a little bit once I get it aligned. I'm gonna try to get it all aligned, and then obviously we'll get it outside. Hopefully, it's supposed to rain for the next like 7 days. So what I'm hoping is we can get it aligned, we'll get the windows all tinted, and then I will show you guys a finished product. So we're completely done with the lowering for now, other than obviously, guys, you need to get it aligned. Anytime you take the ball joints loose and the tie rod ends loose, you need an alignment. I could probably spot on align it to get it better. The wheels are both kind of facing in or this way towards the front of the car, so it is scrubbing some tire. I noticed when I was backing it in, you can hear it on the concrete. At this point, guys, we are finished up, and unfortunately, this is not the way I generally like to show it to you. I generally like to clean things up, but man, the rain out here just will not give me a break. It's been raining for 7 days straight. We had some flooding here in my backyard. Actually moved my truck, my parts truck out there. It got so high and was rushing so fast. I've got kind of a low water area back there in the back, but you can see my parts truck behind my white truck back there. It actually moved it. But anyway, I just can't catch a break from the rain. I generally like to put it out front in the driveway so you guys can see, you know, I can step back and you guys can get a good look at it. But This is just gonna have to do for now. I mean, you're gonna see it in other videos, I'm sure. But windows are tinted, badges are all gone. Obviously it's lowered. We ended up coming in at 33 3/4 inches in the front. That's fender to ground, and then 34 even in the back. So I've driven this a couple times now. I drove it to get the windows tinted. I drove it to get an alignment. Actually, I had the alignment specs here. This was before, and I actually messed with the toe a little bit, so I was really close on toe, and then this is after. The caster's still out of spec, but that's pretty common on these. That's not a real issue in my opinion. He did say that one of the eccentrics or the bolts up front was a little seized up, and so as you guys know in the video, I told you it looked like it's going to need ball joints at some point. I think eventually I'll probably put ball joints in it, upper and lowers. They're kind of weak, but all the badges go on the back. Of course, the window tint, guys, 20% is the factory tint in the back. I went over that 5%, and then the roll-ups on the side here are just 5%, and then the entire front windshield is 35%. So like I said, it's not a real good representation of what it would look like if it were all cleaned up and outside, but I mean, you kind of get the idea. I'll step back here so you guys can see a little better, hopefully. Definitely looks better with the drop. And to be real honest with you, the 34 inches that we are in the back, I think it's gonna settle some. We're actually getting ready to go on a trip. So if it goes below 34 inches, which I really think it's gonna settle another 1/4 to 1/2 an inch. If it does, then I'm gonna put those spring cups in the front that I showed you earlier in the video. I really would like to bring that front down. I would like a 1/2 inch variance, and there's a 1/4 inch now. And the reason why is because even at this, it looks like it's a little lower in the back, and it's not. It's just the shape of the vehicle. And so sometimes when something's completely level, it always looks like it's kind of lower in the back. So I really don't like that look. I like it to have a little bit of a rake towards the front. Not crazy like this thing had before we adjusted it, but I do like a little bit of rake. So at the point where it does settle, when I replace the ball joints, I will probably put those spring cups in that I showed you earlier in the video. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. I think it looks way better. No badges, tint, lowered. Let me know what you guys think. I really did not want to slam this thing, like I'd said, because we do drive it a lot. And I don't want to get into areas where I can't take it places, or it's a hassle because it's so low, or the tires are rubbing all the time. I have no rubbing issues whatsoever. Stock size, 285/45 22 tire. So no issues. I think if I go down another inch in the front, probably get some rubbing, especially like lock to lock, but no rubbing in the back. No, I did not use an adjustable panhard rod. The rear end seems to be in a really good place. So anyway, if you guys did like this video, like always, please smash that thumbs up button. If you are not subscribed, guys, please go down there, hit that subscribe button. Of course, ring that bell icon down there. That notifies you every time we drop a new video. And I'll drop some pictures here at the end of when it wasn't raining. It wasn't super clean, but I took a couple pictures when it wasn't raining that you guys will be able to see. But stay tuned to see what we work on next.